I'm David. I use he and pronouns like I said before, and want to mention a couple things about me so you know where I'm coming from. I'm very privileged to serve as the president of our board of trustees here at First Unitarian. I've been coming here for about 6 years. This is Zed.
Hello. As I introduced myself before earlier as well, I am Zed O'Connor. My pronouns are they and them. And I just want to remind you, about the warning thing. You should probably give that.
Okay, the warning?
Yeah, the warning.
Yeah, we wanted to warn you that we're going to talk about school today. And I wanted to warn you that because I've been to enough parties talking about school, and I think offended enough people that I want to recognize and hold that talking about school is very personal. That we all come, that we identify often very much with our schooling and our beliefs in schooling, even if we're not aware that we have very strong beliefs. And as we're going to talk about what it means to think of children as people, deserving of the same respect and dignity that we extend to everybody, I think a lot about school. And I think a lot about school because school, I feel like, is the place where we've learned what children are and how to treat them. Mostly from being there first and being at school and being treated in a particular way. Maybe we've learned a lot in school. I don't feel like I did, but I know a lot of people feel like they did, and I respect that. Those are the kinds of statements I hope I don't offend you too much, but I'm just going to warn you they're coming. But I do feel like I learned a lot of things about how I ought to be treated when I was in school. I felt like that it was really important that adults watch me, kind of keep an eye on me all the time. I even had a feeling that they were watching me even when they weren't there a little bit, so it felt like really important that kids need to be watched at school. It felt really important that adults evaluate me, right? That what I should do is do things in a particular way so that an adult said I did well, and maybe even wrote it down and sent it home to my parents that I did well. That was something important I learned in school. I learned very much that I and the person next to me were in competition. That we had to kind of get the better grade or get the better whatever to go to the better school. And that as we worked in class, that it was important that I did my work and they did their work, and that we would be, that we weren't allowed to collaborate, and that we would be compared afterwards, right? And I learned all of this, and I felt it was really important because obviously this was right. Because obviously this was a place that my parents sent me, and by doing so implicitly described that this is how you ought to be treated. And I believed them, and I loved them, and I still do. So I learned a lot there about how to treat children. And then I didn't think about that very much. Because there's things that I examine and things that are just there. It's like the water we swim in, you don't really see it, right? It's just, that's how I learned and thought children should be treated. Implicit in that is the idea that children are sort of like empty vessels, right? Not quite complete humans that we're going to fill up. And how lucky they are to have the adults in their lives that are going to fill them up with knowledge and wisdom so that one day they may be a complete human. I get that. I understand that kind of thinking. And it wasn't until I started having kids, thanks for kicking that off, Zed.
No problem.
That started reflecting on that, really, and what that meant. I've been working with kids my entire life, and very much was carrying with them the idea of all of those things that I brought with me from school about how to treat kids. And I started reflecting on that, and I use this as the general frame as a lot of the things we're going to talk about today. I'm thinking about de-schooling, and I'm thinking about how to remove that schoolish way of thinking from my own thinking. And by doing so, learning how to better treat people in general, and particularly children, who kind of capture a special place in the imagination of school. as how they ought to be treated. I think it's very well-meaning, and I think that everybody sends their kids to a school with the best of intentions. And I think school works for a lot of people. It didn't work for me, but I think it works for a lot of people. What I would throw out is questioning, like, are you doing it on purpose? Are you doing it with the child's consent? And or are you doing it just because that's what everyone does? I think, let's just examine the choices. So using school and deschooling, kind of undoing some of these things as a frame for talking about children and treating children with respect, thought that Zed and I might have a conversation a little bit about some of the ways that we've discovered and we've learned about that are useful frames for thinking about how to interact with children, and then actually becomes about actually how to interact with everybody. Because the loop is that I learn how to interact with children better, and I expand the idea that children are people too, and then I learn it's like, oh, all of these ways that I'm treating children better, I can actually treat the adults in my life better also, and treat myself better. And to me, it all comes down to treating that inner child that didn't get necessarily treated with dignity and respect their entire life, and trying to teach that child a little bit about that they are worthy, that they can be trusted, that they don't need to be surveyed, that they don't need to be evaluated, that just how they are is all right. So one of the things I think about Zed is consent. We talk about consent a lot now. I don't know about you, but I didn't really grow up with the concept of consent very much, and it's only been recent that I've learned the importance of it. And I think we can agree that people deserve to consent to how their body is handled, how their body is treated, how their time is spent, how who they do and don't have in their lives. That people should consent to those things, and that children also should be able to consent to those things. I think the classic idea of children consenting to their bodies, at Thanksgiving, the relative wants a kiss or a hug, and the child doesn't really want to give it to them. That's an awkward situation, right? And what's right there? That child has the right to consent to their body, right? To how their body's touched or used, or who they give affection to. And those are maybe sometimes tough conversations, but it's sort of one example as the kind of thing I'm thinking about, that I wouldn't go up to an adult and just assume I can hug them, but maybe with a kid, I feel a little bit more freedom or liberty to just give them a hug or expect a kiss back. And maybe that isn't always there. So Zed, I was wondering, have you noticed times in your life where consent isn't really extended to kids the same way that it is to adults?
A lot of the scenarios that are coming into my mind at this very moment are basically the exact same as what you just posed. Mm-hmm. I can think of family gatherings or going to the beach, whatever it is we're doing. Mm-hmm. And
have there been times where either you or Maddy is my other child. She's 9 and not here today, but probably on Zoom. Hi, Maddy.
Hi, Maddy. And Mom.
Yeah, hi, Karen. It's good to see you. Or see a camera and imagine it's you. I'm just going to imagine it's you. All right. Any time that you felt like you or Maddy haven't been extended consent by us?
I will really quickly warn you, we are both at times slow thinkers. So if there's just a long, awkward pause in between what one of us is saying, you all know what to think that is happening. What?
I can think of a couple things that come to mind. One is I've learned the idea that kids are collaborators, right? That they aren't like my subjects, my employees, that they're our collaborators. Well, hopefully you think of employees as collaborators also, but but it's like I am used to like, okay, one of the great ways to just be around kids is to tell them what to do and they do it and everyone's happy, right? Except maybe not. And so I really think of myself as a collaborator with my kids. That isn't to say that I don't do more of the scheduling than they do, because I'm able to think about calendars differently. I do more of the just maybe suggesting what the framework should be, because I have more experience and more ideas about that. But that the kids should always consent to the restraints and the that are put on them. I can set boundaries about me and my own body and my own time, but I can't set constraints on you that you don't consent to. Mm-hmm. And one thing that kind of always blows my mind is that Maddy really believes this to be true, which is a problem. I don't know if you've ever seen that cartoon of a parent kind of telling their child, I want you to be a strong-willed, independent person when you grow up, but right now I want you to be compliant, is the gist of the cartoon. That extending this kind of dignity to kids is still, it's something I do and something I practice, but it's not something I always do or always practice, because I forget sometimes, and the hard wiring that's still in me is that schoolishness. And so sometimes I will just make unilateral decisions for the kids and not include them in the decision making, even when it affects them. And Maddy gets mad because she knows that's not right. She has been extended that dignity enough to know to expect it and to expect that kind of respect. And so if I make a plan without that she's involved in, without talking to her about it, and she discovers it, I can get kind of mad. That happened like recently, right?
Oh, yeah.
What happened?
Well, I mean, I can think of a few instances. Mm-hmm. Do you mean like the one we were talking about last night?
Yeah.
So we, mainly him, but we run a school, and we are running promotional play dates right now for a new location that we're opening in Aubrey Arboretum. And we went there, and Maddy had expressed that she really didn't want to go because there were like some kids she didn't like or something. I can't fully remember what the main reason was, but she really did not want to go. And she had expressed that to you from what I talked with her about. And she had no other option but to come. And what happened was I had to spend like 10 minutes trying to convince her to come out of the car for reasons of us not getting in legal trouble, and also reasons of it'll be fun, come on. And eventually she did come out reluctantly, and just like sat under a pavilion for like another 45 minutes, really sad and like fuming, but not letting that out. So she was just in her little corner of her picnic bench like that for the better part of an hour.
And eventually she like got up and had fun, and it wasn't so much that like she was dragged to a place that she hated, but she was really mad at me for not cluing her in on this conversation beforehand. So I want to give a little hack here, which is I believe very much in bribery, and that she was sad, and I recognized that it was sad, and I recognized that I had put her in that position, and I recognized that I had kind of forced her to do something that she didn't necessarily want to do. that she would have wanted to do if we talked about it, I believe, but we didn't get to that place, and so that wasn't okay. And so we talked about ice cream, and I talked about getting some ice cream afterwards, and that helped a lot. But what's important about that exchange to me is that it's extending her the dignity of recognizing that there is a cost here, and you've spent your energy and your time in a way that you weren't asked to. And so I want to offer you the acknowledgement that that's not okay, and that here's some way that we can repair the cost a little bit. And while to me that is superficial, to her ice cream is real, and I think that was like a legitimate exchange. But I think that's important, that one of the things that we should do if we're like trying to get anybody but kids to I think about kids who lack a certain amount of power, right, to do something that they don't necessarily want to do. I think you should think of offering them exchange, right? That if you get to the place of going you should do it because I need you to, or because I want you to, or even because the group wants you to, that's a hard thing that a kid takes some time to develop and doesn't necessarily hold that as true, right? They don't necessarily hold as true that the value of the group is more, as important as themselves, that they really still put themselves first. And that's something you can't really rush, that understanding of the importance of the group. So I just want to give a shout out to trades and bribery, to helping kids exchange, give their consent where they wouldn't otherwise. But ultimately, I think kids should give their consent about who they touch and who they get touched by, and where they go and how they spend their time, including school, and all of these things. I also think about risk-taking a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to let kids take risks and take chances.
Yeah.
And that in school, a lot of times we really work hard to keep kids from stretching too far because it can get dangerous, and there's insurance and all of these kind of issues that really constrain kids in physical movement. But I think being able to take risks, that we really learn from mistakes and we learn from failure, and that includes physical mistakes, that includes bumping our heads on things. I feel that if we could remove 2 words from a parent's vocabulary, it might be careful, right? Or that you only get to play that card once or twice a day. If you can imagine, because it's important for a young kid to collide with things and to bump their heads on things, because that's how they understand where their head is, and how to hit their arm on something, because that's how they understand where their arms are. And when kids are small, they're still much closer to the ground. So, a fall for a kid is not such a big deal. But if a 12-year-old doesn't know where their head is, that fall can be kind of dangerous, right? So actually, we're creating danger by keeping our kids safe, I think. What do you think about that?
I think that I've spent enough time around mom's side of the family to hear that, to where I have had to get used to that on my own.
Get used to people telling you to be careful too much?
Get used to not listening to that. I think a classic example is a kid on a play structure climbing something, and their parent says, "I wouldn't do that if I were you," or "Be careful," something along the lines of that. I think that, the kid won't learn through natural consequence. The kid won't learn through natural consequence, which is the way that humans are designed to learn.
Great. I think that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about let kids walk into traffic, right? We're not talking about, so any place where someone's life is in danger, any place where some long-term harm is about to happen, you got to stop that, right? But but it's possible, especially in this day and age, to keep kids completely safe, 100% never experience harm. It's almost possible to do that. We have the technology and the resources and the ability to do that, or at least we do as privileged people. And then kids can really have a hard time learning. And we have this idea from school that the job of adults is to keep kids from doing things that are dangerous, right? And we want to sort of, I think, check that idea. At least constantly ask yourself, are they really dangerous, or is this about me? Are they really about to get in trouble, or is this something that I'm worried about? And that extends, like, as you get older and older. I think a lot about the internet. We don't really have restrictions on internet use. No. Right?
Not at all, basically.
Yeah. And that, there's a lot of kind of like bad stuff on the internet.
Definitely.
There's some stuff that is not good to see or not good to experience. And you've seen some of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sadly.
I won't ask you to describe in detail, but but I think it's important to hit those limits, and that what I'd rather have, rather than saying like, you can't go to these sites, you can't go to this thing, is to have the tools of like, you can click away, you can close that window, you can not watch that, you can move away from that, you can choose where you're going and choose where you're not going. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think developing those skills is really important. And by making, removing any interaction with online content can be dangerous. Removing interaction can be dangerous because we remove the ability for them to learn those skills, and then they don't have them when they really start encountering things that they don't know what to do with. Mm-hmm. And so, like, thinking, removing ability for kids to take risk. It's like, because you wouldn't do that to your adult friends, right? You would be like, or maybe you would, but like, I could see, like, I'm going to tell that person to be careful or warn them all the time. But I'm going to understand that if they want to do something, they can do it. I think we should extend that same dignity to children. I think a lot about, this is a harder one, but about reflective listening. I think a lot about being a good reflection for kids, and that we owe that to them, and that's hard to do, but that it's important. And by that I mean, I can't really perceive you. I can't really perceive myself, but I can perceive you perceiving me. Does that make sense? I don't really know necessarily how much of this is landing as I'm speaking, except I can see, like, some people are giving me feedback and some people are going away a little bit and like, oh, I gotta like move on then, But I don't really know that until I get a reflection from somebody else, right? And so I think about the need to have reflection around you so you can see yourself and understand how you're moving through the world. And that reflection needs to be of quality. I need to have good mirrors around me. I could walk through a fun house and get a really distorted understanding of who I am, right? And there's some people who are bad mirrors in that way. They'll reflect back to you that you're bad, or they'll reflect back to you that you've done something awful when you haven't done anything at all, right? That you need to be a good mirror. And that what I don't need to be is a fixer, and I don't need to be someone who tells someone what to do. I don't need to. If you tell me something that's going on, I don't need to tell you what's wrong with it, or I don't need to tell you how to fix it. I just need to tell you what I'm hearing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, can you think of people who have been good or people who have been bad reflective listeners in your experience?
Probably.
We really talked about this stuff before, I promise. Yeah.
Yes, it's just, we talked about it last night and I'm still a little groggy, so.
I remember you talking about your first grade teacher.
Yeah. School again. In first grade, I did not have the best experience. Talked about this earlier in the sermon about like trying to be helpful to other people, or trying to be what was the
Like
word?
you were trying to be helpful to
I
other
was trying to
people.
be a good friend. I was trying to be helpful. I got shot down for that, which is the typical experience
So,
for most people. In my experience, it was me trying to be a good friend. In my teacher's experience, I was being too loud and I needed to be quiet and I needed to go to the back of the classroom because I was being disruptive when I was whispering in my friend's ear and they were still paying attention to class. I don't know, but
yeah, so
that's a bad mirror.
you were trying to be a friend, you were trying to be a collaborator, you were trying to be helpful. And Zed's always been a good friend and always been a collaborator and always been helpful and really supportive of the people around them and has believed, has a really strong sense of justice. And so when someone's having a struggle and a problem and they're not getting the help, they'll jump in. And that behavior was reflected back to you in that moment as bad.
Yeah.
I remember Zed's impression in first grade was that they were bad, that boys were bad in general, that black boys especially were bad in general, right? And because that was the reflection that they were getting from the classroom, because the behaviors that those people were bringing in didn't line up with the teacher's need, and teachers have it tough. They have to keep 40 kids doing one thing, 30 kids doing one thing. It's hard. It's hard work and kind of impossible. And the tactics you have to wield to be able to do that are rough. But in that case, getting a bad reflection, right? So I think those are some of the big things that we want to walk away with today, that we should extend kids the right to consent. We should extend kids the right to take risks. We should extend to kids reflective listening and being really good mirror back to them. That last one is super hard. Like learning how to really listen and be a good mirror back to anybody is really hard. And kids are great to practice on because you can see really quickly how they're hearing themselves back. You can reflect back and notice something that they did and back to them or say it back to them. And for the most part, you can see really clearly on their faces the connections that they're making. And you can build up those skills. And then you can turn those to your friends and your family who really need it too, and bring that same kind of attention and reflective listening to the adults in your life as well. Like that's a tricky skill, and encourage it strongly. So consent, risk-taking, reflective listening. And then the last thing I just want to mention quickly is trust. That kids deserve your trust. They don't need to be surveyed. They deserve their trust. They deserve your trust to believe them when they say they need something. They deserve your trust that they know how they want to spend their time and they know who they want to be around. They deserve your trust. If a kid is acting not trustworthy, you can let them know about that and name it, but then trust them anyway. Continue to trust them. That actually, like the best way to get anybody, I think, and especially children, to start to be acting in trustworthy way is to trust them. I know that's like a backwards thing for a lot of people. I don't recommend that necessarily for like adults in your life who are harming you, but for kids who are still figuring it out, trust them and let them know that they're being trustworthy, because they're getting a lot of signals from the rest of the world that they're not, that they're not to be trusted, that they don't really know what they want, and so let's extend kids that trust, that reflective listening, that capacity for risk-taking, and their right for consent. So thanks, Zed, for agreeing to do this and being part of the conversation today. Thank you for everyone who makes these Sunday worship services possible, the tech team, musicians, Jake, who stepped in at the last minute because John couldn't make it. Thanks
We are
always
giving you so much praise, dude.
for the great questions and support from Anne. I really appreciate it. And thanks for your attention today. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.